Okay. So my name is Chris Lenski. Welcome, everyone. I'm the CTE coordinator, the grant specialist on the CTE team, I should say. And joining me today is Jessie Sloan, the data consultant on the CTE team. And today's topic for this webcast is the Perkins 5 Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment requirements. And every other year, we head into this needs assessment cycle. And this is just a good reminder. It's a good refresher course, let's say, on how to do a CLNA and the data to look at and the approach to take so that you can have a really robust quality process that informs your strategic planning for career and technical education in the future. Next. Today's topics, oh, Jesse, you can go back, sorry. Today's agenda will be the Perkins 5 law and the key themes of the law, the CLNA requirement, the CLNA process, including the focus areas it covers, the data referenced, analysis that you'll be doing, how you'll be compiling your findings, and the timeline. So Perkins 5 law builds on the successes of Perkins 4 with the intent of advancing data-driven decision-making through a new comprehensive local needs assessment, enhanced efforts to serve special population students through equitable practices, continuous improvement on the student performance on Perkins accountability indicator data, and implementation of quality career pathways as defined by the state. In other words, Perkins 5 is an opportunity to look at what's truly working to move the needle forward for your programs and what's not working, and then to make changes accordingly. This new approach has opened up opportunities for grant recipients to pivot from what's always been done to taking the next steps towards robust quality career pathways and engagement of all students. And we'll explore these in more detail throughout the presentation. So let's take a deeper dive into the first key theme, data-driven decision-making. Data-driven decision-making means making CTE program decisions based on the data that tells you improvement in your programs is needed to achieve positive outcomes. Targeting your decisions and activities to the greatest needs of students, particularly your special population students. And this is done by identifying your data gaps related to the key themes that we just went over, by identifying the main reason or root cause of the gaps. And then you identify the evidence-based activities, strategies, or programs that will address or tackle that root cause. The idea is, if you rectify the root cause of your data gap, you'll no longer have the data gap. All purchases must be made to support the activity that will address and mitigate the root cause so that you reduce the data gap between now and your next CLNA. This process of analysis is called the Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment, or CLNA for short, and we'll talk more about that process in a bit. So who are the special population students targeted for assistance? These are the students who are known to experience various roadblocks to engagement or persistence in CTE. The students identified in the law are those students with disabilities that can be physical, behavioral, cognitive, those likely to need accommodations of some sort to be successful. Students from economically disadvantaged families who may not be able to afford participation in some aspects of CTE, preparing for non-traditional occupational fields, so those students pursuing non-traditional career choices often face bias attitudes and may need additional support to be successful. English learners who may miss opportunities due to limited understanding of the language or biased attitudes that can hinder engagement. Those experiencing homelessness, such as described in McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, because they are often transient and so they miss opportunities or think that certain programs are not for kids like them, so they opt out. Students experiencing or who have aged out of foster care are also often transient. They need signatures, which can be hard to obtain. But mostly, they often lack certain opportunities and think that certain activities aren't for kids like them, and so they also opt out. Single parents, including those who are pregnant, are easily left out of opportunities due to parenting responsibilities. Students with a parent who is on active duty in the armed forces, moving from base to base, often causes them to miss out on opportunities. And also included are disenfranchised subgroups targeted under ESSA, and that's racial and ethnic minority groups and migrant students who, due to bias, may not be targeted for certain pathways or activities. Next. The next theme is instituting a continuous improvement process. This entails examining what your accountability data is telling you about the success of your students according to the prescribed indicators in the law. Even if you statistically have met an indicator, there's still room for improvement to increase your results and make sure that each disaggregated student group is making progress. The indicator numbers are identified by the code on the left. So 1S1 is the percentage of senior CTE concentrators who graduate high school after 4 years. The next group of 3, 2S1, 2S2, and 2S3, are tied to the percentage of senior CTE concentrators proficiency in the state academic standards in science, math, reading, and language arts based on their junior year ACT. Next is the percentage of recently graduated CTE concentrators who 6 months after graduating high school are either in advanced training, they're employed, they're in the military, or volunteering. And the percentage of senior CTE concentrators in programs that lead to non-traditional fields. And finally, the measure of CTE program quality. In our state, that's the percentage of CTE concentrators who participated in a qualified work-based learning opportunity sometime during their high school career. The fourth priority is quality career pathways as defined by the state. This means that to be a pathway approved by Wisconsin, it must align with regional and state projected labor market needs. There must be a sequence of courses in a pathway from introductory to more advanced, and then 2 of the following, either work-based learning experiences aligned to the pathway, industry-recognized credentials aligned to the pathway, dual credit courses aligned to the pathway, or a CTSO aligned with the course in the pathway. This means that in order to spend any Perkins funds on a pathway, it must minimally meet these requirements of size, scope, and quality. And you can find more detail in Appendix A for the application on size, scope, and quality document. Next. So if those are the key themes or priorities of Perkins law, what things are not? For the basics, doing what's always been done. In other words, doing the same thing you've always done without seeing improved outcomes. Maintaining the old, including old practices and spending decisions. Implementing activities with grant funds that are not tied to correcting the root cause of a data gap. And implementing activities that are not evidence-based for advancing change as defined by ESSA. Next. Yeah. So let's switch gears now to focus on the main focus of today's presentation. Now that we all have been level set on what Perkins is about, let's focus to the CLNA requirement while keeping all those themes in the back of our mind. As stated in Section 134 of the law, an eligible recipient to be eligible to receive federal assistance under the grant shall, and shall means must, conduct a comprehensive local needs assessment related to CTE and include the results of the needs assessment in the local application, and not less than once every 2 years update the comprehensive local needs assessment. DPI has automated a 2-year cycle for the CLNA and application process. And it takes probably a good 9 months to complete a good quality CLNA process that's robust and can lead to a strategic plan that incorporates the needed information in your grant application. The Wisconsin Guide for Completing the Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment is available on the Perkins application webpage. Consortium fiscal agents conduct the CLNA process on behalf of all member districts and incorporate the results into one application focusing on the highest needs of the consortium. Next. So why do a needs assessment? The CLNA is more than just a requirement or a box to check. A robust CLNA process that provides valuable results is intended to guide a strategic plan for that 2-year grant cycle. The process of the CLNA is to assist you in understanding where data gaps are and make program decisions based on what will close the gaps in order to improve access and quality programs. The foundation of Perkins 5 implementation is to implement a strategic plan by prioritizing effective activities and spending decisions over that 2-year period. And it's really the best way to obtain stakeholder or consumer input into decision making, right? Your students are your consumers, and they should be involved as well. And of course, it's a way of documenting your efforts to meet the law. Next. So how to begin the process? Begin by identifying a leadership team. One person alone cannot accomplish a thorough and robust assessment. A CLNA team should consist of the CTE coordinator, curriculum director, principal, data steward, CTE department chair, and student services director as some examples. LEAs already have a career readiness or ACP team in place, so perhaps those individuals can be leveraged for the CLNA team as well, since some of the work overlaps. Second, build on other assessments and district improvement efforts already underway through ESSA and ACP, which has comparable planning and assessment processes. Determine what information you already have through those assessments, and then build on that to fill in with what more is needed. This is all to say that as you begin, reach out to those in your district who are involved in and leading existing assessments to see what has been learned and any initiatives already being implemented that you can leverage. Next. Next, outline a plan of action for meeting the requirements of the CLNA. The assessment process involves a variety of tasks, so determine the various tasks and which team members will be responsible for carrying them out. Tasks may include outreach to stakeholders, meeting logistics and scheduling, communications, gathering and creating materials to share, note-taking and compiling the information, and determining decision points, among others that you'll discover you might need. Make sure at least one person is assigned to each task. CTE coordinators alone cannot and should not undertake this whole CLNA process. Create a timeline. When creating a timeline, work backwards from when you'll need the strategic plan completed to the present. Include deadlines for tasks, stakeholder engagement opportunities, meetings, and your decision points. Determine the data that's important for you to assess, and then go about gathering the data. Stakeholders must be involved in conversations about the data, and this can be done through in-person or virtual meetings, focus groups, or interviews. Surveys can be distributed by mail or email or handed out at existing meetings. By now, but how outreach and follow-up will be done needs to be planned for. Surveys can be distributed by mail. Oh, I said that. Solution-focused strategic planning is next. And as you've seen, and many of you have already experienced, the assessment is quite a bit of work. So the more that you get buy-in from others, the better. Next. Stakeholder engagement. Perkins law requires that an eligible recipient shall involve a diverse body of stakeholders in the CLNA process. That includes, at minimum, representatives from local education agencies, and that includes teachers, career guidance and academic counselors, school leaders, administrators, specialized instructional support personnel, and paraprofessionals. Representatives of CTE programs at post-secondary education institutions, including faculty, representatives of local workforce development boards, and a range of local or regional business and industries, parents and students, including students from each special population group, representatives of each special population group, and representatives of local agencies serving out-of-school youth and at-risk youth, because they can articulate what might be roadblocks for students, maybe even better than some of the students themselves. Representatives of Indian tribes and tribal organizations in the state where applicable, and any other stakeholders that the agency, which is DPI, may require. And we require that students and parents of traditionally marginalized racial and ethnic groups also be included, as well as regional career pathway collaboratives. Consultation with this diverse body of stakeholders really is at the heart of ensuring a rigorous and meaningful assessment process. Their involvement is critical to inform the analysis of the data gaps, the root cause of any barriers, and determining effective strategies. Some of the stakeholders may not be as familiar with CTE or career pathways as others, but that's okay. This is a chance to get them involved and understanding your program and be able to talk about it in the community. Next. So that's pretty small for you. Let's talk a bit about engaging students. I really like this chart, even though the font may be a little hard to see. I know that many of you use surveys to engage students in the process, but I'd like you to push beyond that a little. To engage students in actual discussions. Not everyone likes surveys. Surveys are often complete. It's often more questions are wondered about after a survey is given and the results are reviewed and there's no way to follow up on the questions. So it's not always the best way. The chart is related to youth engagement, and I like it because it highlights the importance of quality student engagement that can be applied to family members as well, really. And it's challenging current methods of engaging students and asks, what is the reason that you're engaging students? Again, is it just to check a box? That would be tokenism, right? That informing and consulting column, it's not real engagement, right? The mindset is we're doing this because we have to, and we're going to check a box. And inequities can be reinforced by simply informing certain groups of individuals or limiting involvement to tokenism. Meaningful engagement in decision-making where participants are involved in listening and in providing their perspective to the discussion is really valuable. A few thoughts on engaging youth, though, and even parents. It's best to prepare them in advance of a meeting so that they know what to expect, especially if there's going to be other adults in the room. But inform them about how the process will look, how the seats will be set up, the types of questions that will be asked, because that equalizes the playing field. They're inexperienced with that type of setting. Help them to understand why they're at the table, and then debrief with them afterwards. Sometimes other people in the room can say insensitive things. So make sure to process what they experienced and how they felt and how they may want to engage in the future. And consider how students will be compensated for their time. My guess is a lot of other people it's going to be during work time, or they're going to get a stipend for participating. So perhaps a recommendation letter, experience on a resume, credit towards an independent study or their CTEO leadership experiences, can be lifted up. And don't forget to include students who have not been involved in CTE. You'll find out what is not working for them if you engage them rather than students who have been involved, right? Find out through your data who's not engaged and ask them, why not? Ask them what would make a difference. What more is needed? And ask them about roadblocks they've experienced to participating or for a participant becoming a concentrator. Why haven't they taken that next step? And a final thought about student engagement is that students and all stakeholders should be followed up with, next year, once the CLNA is completed and the strategic plan put in place. And that way they know that their input and their involvement had some sort of impact on what's being done. Next. The CLNA addresses 4 focus areas that are in the Perkins application. This will help you determine the focus of your analysis and the data you need to review for each focus area, because it's a little different for each one. Student performance on federal accountability indicators, progress towards improving equity and access, educator recruitment, retention, and training, and evaluation of career pathways offered, meaning the pathway is aligned to regional and labor market needs, the pathway is of sufficient size, scope, and quality to be effective, and progress towards implementing career pathway elements. We'll also go through these one by one in more detail related to the data that you will review. Next. Here's the first focus area, student improvement on accountability indicators. For this focus area, you'll only pull and analyze your concentrator data. You don't want to see participant data for this. Only concentrator data from year to year related to the indicators listed. This focus area has nothing to do with anything else. It's not related to report card data or state-related CTE data. If you've met the required levels of performance on the indicators, that's great. It means that overall your concentrators are doing well. But the real question is, who isn't and why? And you will only know that if you disaggregate your CTE concentrators by the special population groups and demographics. So, for example, with 1S1, are they graduating? For the most part, we know this is true. Concentrators have very high graduation rates. But are there some demographic groups in your district of concentrators that aren't graduating? Are you curious as to why? What can be done to assist them? For 2S1, 2S2, and 2S3, how well are your senior concentrators doing on the ACT? Again, break down your data by demographics to see what groups of concentrators are not proficient or struggling in reading, language arts, math, and science. Ask why. What is the district doing about it? And this really gets at the level of academic rigor your concentrators have received over their first 3 years in high school. Concentrators of all demographic groups receiving the same level of rigor as other students? 3S1, post-program placement. This data is from the survey that you give your concentrators, right? 6 to 12 months after they graduate, so between December and June. And the way that it's administered is relegated by the Department of Education and seeks to answer the question, now that it's 6 months after graduation, what are students doing? Are they in school? Are they in the military? Are they volunteering? Are they working? Break it out by demographics. Are there certain groups of students that have positive outcomes and others who do not? Are there certain groups of students that you never hear from? Why might that be? And how can you change that moving forward? Non-traditional occupation concentration. To what extent are your groups of students concentrating in an NTO career pathway? If certain groups aren't, ask why. And what can be done about it? Program quality. Wisconsin's quality element, as I mentioned earlier, is work-based learning. What type of work-based learning do you offer? Who's participating in it and who is not? And why is that? Are there other types of work-based learning that could be offered by the district that all students will have access to? Next. The next focus area, progress toward improving equity and access. So the student performance data can certainly inform this, especially if there are disparities between groups of students and you think that there is an equity or access issue. What might need to be done so that you can address it? Which demographic groups become concentrators? That's another thing that can be asked. And which demographic groups don't, and why is that? Again, go further by identifying what must be done to correct the data gap. Look at your outreach and recruitment practices to engage the students. Who's targeted for engagement and who's not? The key is seeking the why behind disparities in your data. How does your data compare to past years? Is disproportionality getting better as a result of your efforts, or is it the same or worse? If things aren't changing, you have to go back and look at your root causes, look at your activities, and see if there's something else that would have a better impact. Next. Oh, and stakeholders, of course, will help in informing all of that. Recruitment, retention, and training of faculty and staff. What type of data will you look at to determine educator needs? Well, you could look at staffing or licensing data. Are there areas of concern? Are there gaps, particularly related, of course, to CTE? Are there gaps in understanding what the CTE program has to offer among all of your faculty and staff? Do people even know what the CTE program offers for kids? Is there training needed in equitable systems of support? Who attends trainings and what kind of trainings and who doesn't? Conduct surveys or focus groups of your educators and administrators to learn more about what's happening and what is needed. Next. For assessing each career pathway, what will you need to look at for that? In past applications, we've seen some copying and pasting of your assessment information. The same thing for each pathway. This is impossible. Every pathway has different instructors, has different students, has different outreach, different stages of development for the quality elements. So take a look at each of your pathways individually to determine and assess and determine what the needs are. Meet with stakeholders and research the needs for your career pathways according to labor market or projected needs in your region. If a pathway is not needed because there's no jobs available in high wage, high skill, and in-demand sectors, then consider why you're offering the pathway. Perkins funds should only be targeted to high wage, high skill, and in-demand sectors. Then look at the different data you have. Does the pathway have a sequence of at least 2 courses from introductory to more advanced level and offer 2 quality elements? Jessie will talk about how to update your roster work plan to use that in your evaluation as well. Which quality opportunities are offered and what needs to be added based on business and industry feedback? Which groups of students are persisting in quality opportunities such as work-based learning, IRCs, dual credit, and CTSOs? And who is not taking advantage of those opportunities and why? Once you've disaggregated the number of concentrators for each pathway, what do you notice about which students are becoming concentrators and which students are not? And ask why. Business and industry, student, parent input through surveys and focus groups as to why these gaps exist in your program can be very informative. And then finally, are there gaps that exist between curriculum and what industry says needs to be offered? Next. I will hand it over to Jessie. You can hear somebody else's voice chatting for a minute.
Thanks, Chris. All right, we're going to go over some specifics and an example of your data collection. So when preparing the data for review, you're going to be breaking it down by special populations. Most of this data will be visible in WISE- for district. However, stakeholder data, you're probably going to record that locally as you are meeting with students and employers and other stakeholders. That's going to be more local data that you'll need to devise a plan to be able to record and collect and then to be able to summarize when you get to the application a year from now. So again, stakeholder survey data or stakeholder feedback can provide clarity and tell the story about your students. And you want to capture the perspectives from teachers, counselors, parents, business and industry partners, so that you understand what's happening out in the world and employment, but also what's happening with your students, and so that you can direct change or make improvement processes that are appropriate for your students within your career pathways. When reviewing your data, we want you to be curious. That's a big part of the data inquiry process, is to be curious. So think about, what are you wondering about that's related to education, services, related to your career pathways, or your CTE programs? Another question to think about is, what do you want to know about students that do and do not take advantage of CTE offerings? So those are just examples. You can have all kinds of different data inquiry questions. And here's some basic ways to begin looking at data that we're going to go over. So a reminder about the CTE workbook that was part of the last year one Perkins application. You're going to hear Chris and I kind of call that two different things. It's the CTE workbook. That was that Excel file that you completed in your Perkins application last year. And then commonly when I present, I refer to it as the roster work plan, which you also just heard Chris say. And that's the layout of your career pathways. So meaning, you've identified that this is a career pathway, you have an identified cluster, and then you have identified sequence of CTE courses, as well as other quality elements that you have outlined. It is a good time when you go through this CLNA process to also update that documentation, because you are going to be sharing that CTE workbook / roster work plan with your data entry person, so that they are properly setting up and updating your student information system to properly calculate and send concentrators to DPI. Thus, you will be able to properly analyze updated data. WISE- for district is not able to auto-calculate career pathways. So that's just a reminder. WISE- features student outcome data, which means it displays students that the LEA, the school, has designated as a concentrator, and that's all it sends us, is that last endpoint. You have decided that this student is a concentrator in a career pathway cluster, and it sends us just that cluster information. So it's not going to show you the combination of courses that go into your pathways. It will show you individual courses and whether or not those are dual enrollment, have IRCs, or are designated work-based learning time, but it's not going to combine everything for you. So you really need to rely on that CTE workbook roster work plan to really understand what's in your pathways. What specifically are your students taking when they are designated as a concentrator? So the CLNA data directions, this is a link to an Excel document that we created, and it's going to have, we're going to go through it in a moment. It's going to have information on a tab, how to use that file. It's also going to have some other tabs, one called the concentrator enrollment or enroll summary, that is going to assist you with recording the data that you see in WISE-. And then it's going to also have some auto-calculated fields that are going to help you do some analysis. And then there are some other tabs in that workbook that are going to give you exactly how to set up WISE- for district, so that if you are not sure, you could do this and copy what I did, or you can always reach out and schedule some time with me, or you can always attend the third Thursday of the month data trainings at 3 o'clock that are during the regular school year. So again, this is just the CLNA data directions. It's just a basic Excel workbook with some basic data analysis to review concentrator data. The two dashboards that I'm going to encourage you to use for this analysis in the CLNA are going to be the Perkins dashboard for concentrators, and then the enrollment dashboard so that you can look at your LEA enrollment data. And this is what the CLNA data direction workbook actually looks like. So you can see the concentrator enroll tab. It's going to show you all of the clusters, which I have in gray. And then it's going to allow you to indicate how many concentrators you have in each of these pathways. Okay, so that's really easy data to obtain in WiseDash, and I give you the directions on how to do it in this tab called Perkins Dashboard. And then through the Perkins Dashboard, you can also desegregate your data by gender or sex, race, the special populations, and then all of the special populations. The only one you're not going to find in K-12 is out of workforce individuals, because our students aren't actually full-time employees. They are students first. So I have that grayed out. So you would easily be able to go into WiseDash for District Perkins Dashboard, and you'll easily be able to pull the numbers to complete this for each of the clusters. And I have the demonstration. And then this first column says number of concentrators with any work-based learning. That is a cross tab as well in the Perkins Dashboard. And you will be able to look at that and desegregate that out as well. When you begin to fill out these columns, it will begin to add them up and auto-calculate in the purple column. Then you will go into another dashboard called the enrollment dashboard, and you can then find the 11th and 12th grade enrollment. And you can enter that information. And then the rest of these green columns will auto-calculate the percentages for you. So why am I comparing my concentrators to 11th and 12th grade enrollment? I'm comparing my 11th and 12th grade concentrators to the 11th and 12th grade general enrollment, because that is the same group. It does not make sense to compare 11th and 12th grade concentrators to 9th graders, because 9th graders haven't had enough time and exposure to courses to be able to become concentrators. So you want to compare, okay? All right, this is a very easy demonstration of how to set up your Perkins dashboard to look at CTE concentrators by cluster, and then to determine if any of them participated in any work-based learning program throughout their high school career at your school. So you can see that I have this little itty bitty tiny star here, and that's because it's a filter. So these 3 lines are a filter. I clicked on it and I removed the nose, because I just want to look at my students that are concentrators. Okay, so then I can see by cluster my concentrators. Okay, and then I can see any work-based learning, yes or no, which means in manufacturing, I had 35 of my concentrators at any time in high school participate in work-based learning. But 4 of my manufacturing concentrators, they have no work-based learning during their high school career. So that's how you read it. Okay. This is the dashboard for career education and coursework. So this is really digging deep. Generally speaking, you don't necessarily need to dig this deep into your CLNA, but I understand we just talked about being curious. So maybe you want to be curious at the program level for work-based learning. So this is the dashboard that you will be able to see the work-based learning programs by name. And we have 8 work-based learning programs that we calculate as work-based learning in the state of Wisconsin. Okay, so this is how I set up the career education and coursework dashboard. This dashboard is going to show you 1 school year at a time. It does not calculate work-based learning over an entire student's career. It is only for 1 reporting year. Okay, so that's why you're digging pretty deep when you're in here. So again, I have this set up to look at concentrators. And then The program name is always there. You can remove it, but it naturally defaults on program name, which is the actual name of work-based learning or industry recognized credentials. So it gets confusing to some people because they think if you just leave it at the program name that IRCs or youth leadership are then work-based learning. And IRCs and youth leadership are not work-based learning. So I put the work-based learning crosstab in here so that I can delineate, no, these two are not, but yes, internship, simulated, this state co-op and youth apprenticeship are. So now I can look at my yes column, meaning for this program year, and I believe it was 23-24 that I automatically defaulted on, I can see in that 1 year, I had 5 concentrators take internship. I had 87 concentrators take simulated worksite, and then you can go on, okay? Now it's not calculating if a concentrator took this, any work-based learning in prior years. I would have to flip my year. That's why this is really micro data, and it's when you're curious, okay? Okay. So there's a number of resources available to you to help you compile, analyze, and manage data that you want to look at, collect, prepare, and share with your CTE team and your stakeholders when you're doing this entire CLNA process. It's always best practice to use charts and graphs and other types of visual data presentation tools rather than focus on spreadsheets with students' names and identifying characteristics that could possibly harm a student or over-identify them. Okay, so you can take information from WiseDash. You have the ability to dig really deep into individual students, but when you are working within a group, it's always best practice to convert any of that information into a graph or a pie chart so that people see big picture versus the micro stories of each student, because we don't want to have any form of student harm by exposing them. If they are part of a special population that could, people might say things about or spread information about. So also on this webpage, you're going to notice that I have the Wise Explore data inquiry process. And Wise Explore is a great team to learn from. They provide training about Wise for District and the data inquiry process. And so you have the ability through the DPI website that is linked right here to be able to gain access to those materials. You also have the ability to work through your CISA, as there are individuals that usually come from the School Improvement Services team that specialize in training in the data inquiry process. And you would utilize these resources, one, for the student data inquiry process to really understand formats, layouts, different techniques to do an inquiry. There is a data inquiry planning guide, so if you need further instruction, and there's also training manual or modules to help you with the data inquiry process. There's also a slide deck on this website for how to do root cause analysis, as well as Chris and I have also provided documents to you in the past, and we will do so again in the future about root cause analysis as well. Also part of the data inquiry process is creating hypothesis statements. These are very helpful when you are trying to check your root cause to ensure that your root cause went deep enough to know that that is actually the root cause that is causing the data gap or the data observations that you are seeing. Okay, so all of this is available for assistance by going to the Wise Explore web pages. And some additional tips for analysis. For analysis, but also for recording your data and what your findings are. So this will help you prepare for the CLNA section of the Perkins application that you're going to complete next spring. And you want to be able to document your data inquiry process to make sure that it makes sense, that you went through and you analyzed all the correct information, but also you want to document your observations so that you can then write those into your narrative section. You're going to document your root cause analysis and your final rationale. So in our application process, we don't need to know step by step how you actually conducted your root cause. You might need to know that in your notes so that you can replicate it in the future or speak to it to understand it. But you really need to be able to document a rationale that you are going to be using as part of your application next year. I'm going to encourage you to write a null hypothesis statement as part of your data inquiry. And this allows you to check your root cause and then disprove it. This is how you know if your analysis and activities are on the right course. Okay. Create activities that support closing the gap analysis. And those activities you are going to create in partnership with your stakeholders who know the populations best. And you're going to make sure that the activities that come out of all of this make sense to help those special populations. Implement a continuous improvement model to vet effectiveness of activities and strategies. Be aware that you have other teams in your school districts, in your consortium that are also doing a continuous improvement model in a very similar fashion for other federal grants, such as IDEA and ESSA. And so utilize those teams and the data inquiry process and root cause analysis that they are using to be consistent and to double check yourself. And then lastly on here, it says create annual performance measurement goals. And so you are aware that the state does set state performance measures in our state plan, but you also should be creating annual performance measures for your LEA or consortium so that you start the year with a goal and you're always moving forward versus waiting for the state to give you a performance measure. And so bottom line through this slide is maintain a record of these bullet points where you have the ability to write everything down, document it, but also prepare your notes for how you're going to write updated information in your CLNA section for your Perkins application. And I'm going to turn it back to Chris.
Thanks, Jessie. If you take away anything from this presentation, I hope is that the CLNA process is not a standalone activity. It must inform and ultimately tie together your program and spending decisions based on your documented needs. If you plan to use Perkins funds for your activities, the items you purchase must be tied to addressing the root causes of your data gaps in order for it to be approved. Some of you will need to do a much better job at doing this than you have in the past because we're needing to get people more focused on meeting these requirements. So as you look at the flowchart graphic, the data analysis that you are doing as part of your CLNA and then to the data analysis essentially drives the identification of your data gaps and your root causes of the gaps, which then drives your goals and activities. And your goals and activities then drive your budget planning. So budget planning is not a list of wants from your teachers. Spending must be part of the whole picture to move your CTE program forward towards innovation, positive outcomes, and access for all students. Keep records of the stakeholders you engage and how you engage them so that it can also be documented in your application as well. Next. Here is your Perkins task and responsibilities timeline. Those of you who are Coordinators have seen this before, and I just want to call your attention to the bottom line, and that's the CLNA. So the topic is in the blue to the left, and then for every month, pretty much starting in July, ideally, you are focused on moving the CLNA process forward. You're starting with your preparation through the summer months, getting the dates on the calendar, maybe sending hold the dates or invites to participate, or you're drafting your surveys, things like that. And then you'll conduct the process next fall and then begin to put together your strategic plan based on the root causes and the activities you're going to implement over the next 2 years to address those root causes, because the application comes out in March. And that's the top line are your application deadlines. And so you can see in March, the Perkins application is always made available. And so you'll need to have everything together before you start your application. You'll want things drafted and aligned so that when it comes time to entering all this information in the application, you can just enter it and you're not still trying to hurry up and finish up the process. Next. So if you have any questions throughout your process or beginning the process, feel free to reach out. Jesse and I work during the summer, so we are here for you at any time. I mean, of course, we'll take vacations, but we are available and you can reach out and ask us questions, or if you get stuck on something, you're not quite sure of a next step, just reach out to me for applications and CLNA process questions. And if you have any data questions, reach out to Jesse. Now that concludes our presentation. So I'm going to stop the recording.
There was 2 questions, Chris. One of them was, will we send out the presentation?